Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are looking at an absolute modern legend. Netflix is the pioneer that literally changed the entertainment industry forever. They completely rewrote the rules of how we consume media, scooping up hundreds of millions of subscribers, producing these massive award-winning originals, and just building an unbelievable global reach. But here's the fascinating twist. Despite this monumental, historic success, Netflix is essentially a hero under siege. They built this beautiful, highly lucrative castle, right? But right now, today, they are facing one of the most ruthless, relentless business environments in the world. Because in the streaming universe, competition never ever sleeps.
If you just trace their steps for a second, Netflix's journey is the total masterclass in adaptation. They started out at step 1, totally disrupting the market with those iconic red DVD envelopes in the mail. Then they boldly transitioned into step 2, basically establishing global streaming dominance before traditional media even knew what hit them. But right now, we are squarely in step 3, the brutal streaming wars. That castle they built, it's currently surrounded by aggressive threats on literally all sides. We're talking global media giants, new tech platforms, skyrocketing production costs, and intense technological disruption. So the really big question is, how do they actually survive this?
Well, to understand exactly what Netflix is up against, we need to map the battlefield. And we're going to do that using a classic, heavy-hitting strategic framework, Porter's 5 Forces. Don't think of this as some dry academic theory. Think of it as our tactical map. It tells us exactly where the attacks are coming from and just how strong those enemy forces really are, giving us a perfectly clear view of the siege that is currently underway.
So here is our roadmap for the rest of this explainer. These are the 5 distinct invading armies that Netflix has to battle every single day. We've got competitive rivalry, the threat of new entrants, the bargaining power of buyers, the bargaining power of suppliers, and finally, the threat of substitutes. The stronger any one of these forces becomes, the harder it is for Netflix to hold on to its profitability and its crown. So let's dive right in and break each one down.
Starting with Front 1, the rival empires. This is competitive rivalry, and it is absolutely the first and most intense battlefront for Netflix.
Just look at the sheer scale of the competitors here. We are not talking about scrappy little startup challengers, okay? We're looking at Disney, Amazon, Warner Brothers Discovery, Apple, not to mention massive regional platforms all over the globe. This is a deeply, deeply saturated market filled with tech and media titans who have bottomless pockets, and they are attacking Netflix's castle on multiple fronts simultaneously. They're fighting ruthless battles over subscription pricing, they're aggressively locking down exclusive content, and they're constantly upgrading their own user experiences. Netflix is completely surrounded by empires that have just as much capital and just as much ambition as they do.
Let's move on to Front 2, the new invaders. This is the threat of new entrants, where we'll look at who else is trying to breach the streaming market walls. Now, for a small, independent entrant, the walls of the Netflix castle are just way too high. To even compete today, you need billions for content investment, a flawless global server infrastructure, and incredibly sophisticated recommendation algorithms. It's pretty much an impossible barrier to entry for the little guy. But, and this is a huge but, massive tech corporations bypass these barriers entirely. Because companies with massive existing ecosystems already have millions of tight-end customers, infinite cloud infrastructure, and massive cash reserves. They can basically just parachute right over the walls. So while a new startup won't kill Netflix, a tech giant suddenly deciding to pivot into media, that is a highly dangerous new invader.
And that brings us to Front 3, the fickle mercenaries. This is the bargaining power of buyers, and it reveals a harsh truth. The viewers themselves are actually a massive force to be reckoned with.
I want you to think about your own viewing habits for a second. Be honest, why stay if you can cancel in just one click? This is the brutal reality of the streaming business. Unlike a traditional bank or maybe a telecom provider where switching costs are painfully high, switching streaming services is incredibly, almost dangerously easy. You, the buyer, hold immense power. In this framework, you're essentially a fickle mercenary. If you want to watch one specific trending show for a month, you'll subscribe, you'll completely binge it, and then you'll immediately abandon ship the very second the credits roll on the finale.
So, to stop you from canceling, which the industry calls churn, Netflix has to work incredibly hard, literally nonstop. They have to provide a relentless stream of fresh, buzzy content. They have to utilize hyper-smart AI to figure out exactly what your next obsession should be. And they have to ensure absolute platform reliability globally. Because subscriptions are relatively inexpensive on their own, consumers will freely and quickly rotate their money elsewhere if Netflix drops the ball for even a single month. It is a constant, exhausting fight just to retain your loyalty.
All right, let's look at front 4, the supplier betrayal. This is the bargaining power of suppliers, which is where traditional allies suddenly turn into bitter rivals.
Back in the early days, Netflix relied really heavily on licensing beloved shows and movies from traditional studios. The suppliers, think Disney, NBC, Warner Brothers, they were totally happy to just take Netflix's cash. But then, the betrayal happened. These powerful suppliers woke up, realized the massive value of streaming, and launched their own platforms like Disney+, Max, and Peacock. And then, they ruthlessly pulled their most popular content right off of Netflix. They essentially held their shows hostage. So to survive this, Netflix had to pivot, and they had to pivot hard. They were forced to invest aggressively in original, owned productions just to ensure they had a library that no supplier could ever take away from them.
Now let's transition to front 5, the invisible enemy. This is the threat of substitutes, and honestly, it might just be the most underestimated invading army of all.
See, this completely reframes the entire war. On one hand, yes, you have the traditional streaming battles. TV shows, feature films, documentaries, but the real existential threat lies elsewhere. TikTok, YouTube creators, interactive gaming, just mindless social media scrolling. Netflix isn't just fighting television anymore, it is fighting a brutal, all-out war for human attention and screen time against entirely different digital mediums. Especially when we look at younger audiences, a substitute for watching a 2-hour Netflix movie is very often just spending 2 hours scrolling short-form video. Netflix is literally competing against every single other thing that glows on your screen.
Okay, so with the castle completely surrounded by these 5 formidable forces, how does our hero actually strike back? Let's look at the counterattack, Netflix's strategic arsenal.
Billions, with the B. That is the staggering annual financial risk and investment Netflix pours into content production every single year. It's a jaw-dropping amount of money, but they literally have to spend it. This massive capital expenditure is what builds that massive barrier against competitors, and it guarantees that when you log on, there is something new, expensive, and explosive waiting for you. It is simply the cost of keeping the castle walls fortified. But to be fair, they aren't just throwing money at the wall to see what sticks. They are executing a highly diversified growth strategy. Like we mentioned, they leaned heavily into original owned productions, so suppliers can't dictate their future. But they also brilliantly expanded into global storytelling. Think about massive cultural smash hits like Squid Game or Money Heist. By sourcing content from Korea, Spain, and all over the world, they aren't just relying on the Hollywood machine anymore. Combine that with their massive AI-driven data optimization to feed you exactly what you want, introducing ad-supported plans to capture a wider, more price-sensitive market, and even launching brand-new gaming initiatives to fight off those invisible enemies. These right here are their core weapons for survival.
Which brings us to our conclusion, the endless war, survival in the digital age.
There is this incredible quote from our source material that perfectly captures the reality of modern business dominance. Its survival depends not on avoiding competition, but on evolving faster than competitors. In today's digital economy, competitive advantage is never permanent. You can't just build the castle and rest. Intense rivalry, highly empowered customers, unpredictable suppliers, and endless substitutes mean that your advantage must be continuously, relentlessly rebuilt from scratch.
So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Netflix has already transformed the entire world of entertainment once. They survived the perilous shift from DVDs to streaming, and they are currently holding their own in the brutal streaming wars. But as the market evolves and human attention shifts in entirely new, unpredictable directions, can Netflix transform itself yet again before the industry completely leaves them behind? Because in this environment, the biggest risk isn't the competition itself. It's becoming irrelevant while the world changes around you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will catch you in the next one.